If you would have told me in 2006 that Troy Bolton from High School Musical would go on to make me well up and be on the verge of tears in 2023 with a performance, a very serious performance for that matter, in a very serious film, I'd call you a goddamn liar. But here we are. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today it's going to be a movie review for The Iron Claw, starring Zac Efron as Kevin Von Erich from the famous Von Erich wrestling family. Now, this is the family that has the quote-unquote Von Erich curse. This film comes to us from A24 Films. I was lucky enough to get a screener because we actually don't get the film here in Australia for another couple of weeks, but I was desperate to check it out, especially with all the hype, all the buzz around Zac Efron's performance, but not only his performance, the movie itself. I had no idea about the Von Erich family, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be a wrestling expert. I dabbled in watching wrestling in the late 90s when it was the WWF era with Stone Cold Steve Austin and all that jazz, but I just never really got into it. So I am by no means a wrestling expert, and I didn't even know about the Von Erichs until the set photos were released of Zac Efron looking like a jack to the nines Lord Farquaad from Shrek with that haircut and just looking like an absolute tank. Now, the basic premise of The Iron Claw is we follow the Von Erich family through all the tragedies that happen within the timeline from the 70s right up until the 90s. The family consists of the head of the household, Fritz Von Erich, who is an absolute taskmaster and all-around hard-ass. He is a father to boys Kevin, Kerry, Mikey, and David Von Erich, three of which are professional wrestlers. Mikey just wants to follow his dreams of being a professional musician and sing, much to the dismay of his father, and they also have their mother, Doris, who I wouldn't say is the head of the family, but she definitely tries to keep all the boys in line, and essentially being the only female in the family, you can tell that she's on the brink of having a breakdown almost 24/7, especially with how much of a hard-ass Fritz is as a father and how hard he is on the boys. Now, Fritz was a former wrestler in real life and then went on to start coaching the boys, and again, just wanted them to wrestle for the rest of their lives. Now, my first overall thoughts of the film, this is a very heavy cinematic experience, like up there with Requiem for a Dream. To me, it is a one and done, but I'm so glad I watched it. All the performances are brilliant, not just Zac Efron. I will touch on Zac Efron's performance. I wouldn't say it's a tour de force performance. It's more subtle, subdued, and by the very end, he lets loose with his emotions, and I think that's why it works so well. There's nothing exactly stand-outish throughout the first act, the second act, but by the third act, he really brings it all home in terms of his performance, and just such a stark contrast from his High School Musical days. And it's great to see him breaking out and doing these reactive roles, these more subtle, subdued roles. And I thought he was great, but not only that, all the other supporting performances were great with his brothers, the father, everything was just wonderfully done. And the cinematography is so well done. We have a lot of lingering shots, and it's one of those things where not much is going on in the particular shot. You are relying on the actors' brilliant performances, subtle performances for that matter, to really sell these shots. And I love that they do a lot of long takes when it came to the wrestling scenes. The cinematographer, the director, wanted to showcase how hard these actors had trained to become professional wrestlers for this film. Not just from a physical standpoint, because all of them look incredible, especially Zac Efron. Like, the guy is on so many tremboloni sandwiches, it's not funny, but he looks great. I can only imagine the training, not just physically, but mentally, that they had to go through. And I love that there's not a lot of quick cuts with the wrestling scenes. There's just a lot of one take, steady cam shots just to showcase the beautiful choreography that is done with the wrestling scenes. Now, if you haven't read into the Von Erich family, if you're a complete novice like I was, I unfortunately made the mistake of reading into what happened to the boys, and it kind of, I wouldn't say it spoiled my cinematic experience, but it definitely gave me that anxiety because I knew what was going to happen and what was coming. But if you go into this blindly, not knowing the history of the Von Erich curse, this is going to make it even more of a cinematic experience for you. It is going to be a heavy one, but a good one at that. But for those who are experts in the Von Erich curse and wrestling overall, I really do hope that this does the wrestling world justice for you. Like I said, I'm a complete novice when it comes to the wrestling world, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, especially when you see how hard those actors had trained, especially Zac Efron from a physical standpoint. But overall, there isn't a bad performance in the bunch. Everything is just perfect with this film. There was a moment in the third act, at the very end, the climax of the film, that took me out of it for a couple of seconds, if not probably a minute. And I think it's just because it got a bit existential. The film is quite symbolic at some times, considering what happens to some of the boys in the film, and obviously what happened to them in real life is an absolute tragedy. And it's just one of those things where it's like a car crash TV. You just are fixated and just can't help but watch every single bit of what happened to this family. But going back to the climax, there was one sequence and one directional choice that took me out of it, and I didn't expect it because the film is just so grounded on a whole. And I love that they don't over dramatize the events that happened in the Von Erich family. It's not over the top. It's subdued, it's subtle, much like the performances. Like, this isn't a flashy biopic film. This is something nitty gritty and very different, and I love the film for that. So guys, overall, if you are a wrestling fan, if you are not a wrestling fan, I think this film is definitely gonna do it for you. For me, it is a one and done. I don't feel the need to watch it ever again, much like I said, Requiem for a Dream. I'm glad I experienced it. I'm glad I watched it, but also have something queued up afterwards. It's a bit more happy to watch. But again, it is a fantastic film. It is a great break from the recent comic book films as of late. Like, you don't have to wait around for a post-credit scene for Skippy McDippy to show up at the end and for it to cut to black and say the Von Erichs will return in the Von Erich cinematic universe, the multiverse for that matter. And with that, I'm going to be giving the Iron Claw 4 Lord Farquads out of 5. So guys, if you have seen the Iron Claw, drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. If you are a wrestling fan, did it do the world of wrestling justice for you? Especially in that time period from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. If you're not a wrestling fan like me, what were your thoughts? Love you guts, and I'll catch you in the next one.